the Open Public Meetings Act?
Yes, they have, Mr. Speaker.
Notice of the calendar for this session of the General Assembly having been sent to the members of the House, the Secretary of State, and the State House Press and posted in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, I declare the House to be in session. Madam Speaker, please open the machine for a quorum call. Madam Clerk, close the machine and take a tally.
Mr. Speaker, you have 62 members present. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Resolution on the clerk's desk.
Motion by Majority Leader Greenwald that the Assembly adopt Senate concurrent resolution calling for joint legislative session to receive the State of the State address from the Governor.
Majority Leader Greenwald.
Mr. Speaker, I move the resolution.
Majority Leader Greenwald moves the resolution. Assemblywoman Sumter. Seconded by Conference Leader Sumter. All in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. The ayes have it. I recognize the Senate Majority Leader from Bergen County representing the 37th District, Senator Loretta Weinberg. I recognize the Assembly Majority Leader from Camden County representing the 6th Legislative District, Assemblyman Louis Greenwald. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. I'm advised by the Secretary of the Senate and the Clerk of the General Assembly that a quorum is present at this joint session. Please rise for the invocation to be delivered by Reverend Duncans of the Shiloh Baptist Church in Port Norris.
Let us pray. Dear wise and loving Father, the God of mercy and peace, we first would like to thank you for your creative splendor in giving us the joy of a brand new day. For your word declares that you have made everything beautiful in its time. We stand in awe of your glory, and we are amazed by your faithfulness to us. We also thank you for the prayer, support, and well wishes of our families. We must never forget that when we are involved in public service, it is our families who are there in the good times and the bad, making sacrifices and picking up the pieces of our often weary souls. Then we celebrate our political process, which is based upon the will and needs of the people. It gives us immense comfort and gratitude to know that even in these chaotic, fragmented, and divisive times, there are still men and women of character who will serve to make sure that government is inclusive, fair, and accountable. That is a government where social justice and equality become normative and intolerance, discrimination, gender, and racial divides have no place. Now, God, we respectfully request that you bless these leaders with the wisdom and courage to govern with honesty and internal integrity as they face the myriad of challenges and conflicts that come with their positions. Grant them discernment and compassion to help them to think clearly so they will be strong and effective leaders. In the distinguished words of President Abraham Lincoln, nearly all men can stand adversity, but if you want to test a man's character, give them the power. It is our prayer that the power, privilege, and responsibility of these sacred duties of these lawmakers will permit them to be temperate and fair in all of their decisions. We thank you for honoring our request. Continue to cover us with your peace and hold us in the hollow of your hand. It is your holy righteous name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Reverend Duncans. Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by Assemblywoman Lopez from Middlesex County, representing the 19th Legislative District. Yvonne. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Assemblywoman Lopez. I recognize the President of the New Jersey State Senate from Gloucester County, representing the 3rd Legislative District, Senate President Steve Sweeney.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I wish to inform the joint session of the 218th Legislature that the Governor has arrived. My colleagues, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and pleasure to present the Governor of the State of New Jersey, the Honorable Christie. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Now, before we begin, I'm going to ask you for a favor. not for a moment of silence, but for a moment of celebration for the extraordinary life of Governor Brendan Byrne. That's what he would have wanted. We know Brendan. He wouldn't have wanted silence. He would have wanted celebration. So let's all rise and celebrate Governor Byrne. Nine years ago, yesterday, I went to pick up then 8-year-old Patrick and then 5-year-old Bridget from school. On my way out of school with them on the front lawn of the Assumption School in Morristown, I announced to the assembled media that I was a candidate for governor of New Jersey. On that day, I said many things, but looking back on it, the most important statement was this. I said, if you're looking for the same old stuff, you got the wrong person. Little did I know just how right I would be 9 years later. You know, 9 years is a lifetime ago in today's culture. A culture of DVRs that skip commercials, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and the short attention spans that come from these latest ways of communicating. So today, I want us to take a breath. We need to remember where we were 9 years ago. On the brink of financial ruin as a state, more people unemployed than at any time in modern history, a culture in Trenton of avoiding the tough decisions, of taxing more, of spending more, of borrowing at breakneck pace, the highest property taxes in America growing at a record rate. We had to have tough and plain-spoken leadership to deal with these problems. We needed to care less about being loved and more about being respected. That's why I ran for governor. I ran to be different. I ran to speak bluntly. I ran to shine lights on all of New Jersey's real problems. I ran to offer tough but achievable solutions. I ran to be a governor who did not just mark time. I ran to win. I always run to win. And I ran to be a governor of consequence. And even though it's easy to forget those days and to minimize the crises of 9 years ago, in crisis indeed we were in 2009. Without the new policies and the new attitude that a band of former prosecutors brought here 9 years ago, the crisis could have defeated us. Now, in the same way, if we revert to the policies of the past, believe me, it is a short road back to the edge of disaster. See, as Einstein said, while he was a professor down the road at Princeton, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. Now, due to the fighting attitude we brought and the pro-growth policies we have fought for and achieved together, I'm proud to be here today to tell you that the state of our state is very good and, without question, much, much better than it was 8 years ago. I say to my friends on both sides of the aisle, the facts are the facts. 8 years ago, we inherited a state with an unemployment rate at 10%. In our 8 years, that unemployment rate was cut in half. 8 years ago,
we had lost 248,000 private sector jobs, and businesses were leaving our state at a record pace. Today, 8 years later, we have helped the private sector create 334,400 new jobs. And this year, 2017, that just passed, 108,252 new businesses were created in New Jersey in 2017 alone, an all-time economic record for our state. The facts are the facts. More New Jerseyans are employed today than at any time in our state's history, even though our population is growing at the slowest rate it has grown in state history. A long way from the depressing record of 8 years ago. And I want you to remember this as we sit here today. This morning, 4.3 million New Jerseyans woke up and had a job to go to work to today to support their families. We are proud of that. How did it happen? Where did New Jersey's economic growth and job creation come from? In 2011, together, we passed broad-based business tax cuts that led to $3 billion in lower taxes that our corporate citizens in this state plowed into job creation, putting hundreds of thousands of our citizens back to work. We took an unemployment insurance fund that was $2 billion in debt 8 years ago. We have paid off that debt in record time. We passed a constitutional amendment to prevent politicians from stealing from this fund again, and today, as we prepare to leave office, that fund is over $2 billion in surplus, not $2 billion in debt. And by the way, the reform of our unemployment insurance fund has led to an additional $400 million in job-creating tax cuts for our New Jersey businesses, not tax increases. We passed the Economic Opportunity Act of 2013 together, which has helped us to make New Jersey more competitive at attracting and retaining jobs, putting even more of our citizens back to work. We reduced job-killing regulations at the direction of the Lieutenant Governor by 1/3 over the previous administration, freeing up resources to put New Jerseyans back to work, not waste money on lawyers and accountants to understand the next thing government was ordering them to do or not to do. That's how to create jobs, not through the government doing it. And finally, and most importantly, we held the line on new and increased taxes. I vetoed income tax increases. I vetoed corporate tax increases. I vetoed energy tax increases. In fact, over the last 8 years, I have vetoed more tax increases than any governor in modern American history. Let me say this to my friends on this side of the aisle who just stood up. Each one of those vetoes was sustained by my Republican colleagues in the legislature through the leadership of Senator Tom Kean Jr., the late Alex DeCroce, and Assemblyman John Bramnick. The beleaguered taxpayers of New Jersey were protected for the first time in a decade from tax increases. So I want to say to Tom, to John, to Betty Lou, on behalf of her late husband, and to all the Republicans who stood up and made those difficult votes, On behalf of the people and the businesses of New Jersey who have much more of their own money in their pockets because of their leadership, thank you very much. You see, lower tax policies have worked to revive a moribund economy and led to 7 consecutive years of private sector job growth. Now that is a very consequential accomplishment, consequential for all the people of the state of New Jersey. 8 years ago, we inherited a budget that was bloated, out of balance, and riddled with gimmicks. Riddled with gimmicks. $2 billion in deficit in a fiscal year that was only 5 months from ending. A projected $11 billion deficit in the coming fiscal year, a total of $13 billion in projected deficits over our first 18 months. Too many public employees doing too little and costing too much. One-shot gimmicks that accounted for over 13% of our revenue when I entered this chamber 8 years ago. We deferred raises in the last administration. We deferred payments in the last administration. All of them left as a ticking time bomb and a little gift for the new governor. In addition, in the 8 years before we arrived, debt issued by state government increased by more than 10% per year every year. An unsustainable rate of debt. In our 8 years, we have reduced that rate of growth by 3/4 to only 2% a year over the last 8 years. We have stopped the decade of exploding debt growth initiated by our predecessors. Today, budgets have been balanced for 8 years in a row. Today, there are over 10,000 fewer state employees. Today, discretionary spending is nearly $2 billion less than it was 10 years ago. Not growth, actual dollar-for-dollar spending. And those one-shot revenues that created those enormous chasms, down from 13.2% to 2.8%. So let's be clear before the next team comes in here. We are handing off a state that is growing jobs and a budget that is honestly balanced, unlike what we inherited 8 years ago. One other way that we control that. For 8 years, we have said no to unbudgeted, unplanned for, exorbitant spending. And we have used the veto and the line item veto to enforce fiscal responsibility. So it's been 8 years. How much spending have we used the veto and the line item veto to stop for our taxpayers? Beside Oroho and Bucco, probably nobody knows it off the top of their head. I will tell you, we have vetoed and line item vetoed $7.3 billion in spending that the legislature appropriated and wanted to do that we simply didn't have the money to pay for. That's nearly $1 billion a year every year that we kept in the pockets of our citizens and out of the hands of Trenton politicians. That's the way you honestly balance budgets in this state, not by continuing to raise taxes on the people of New Jersey. So for Governor-elect Murphy, we hand him a budget that is in balance with a surplus, not the $2 billion deficit we were handed 8 years ago. Those are the actions of an administration that treated our citizens' money as if it were our own. Those are actions with real consequences for every taxpayer in this state. Now, while the budget crisis was the most immediate task that we faced 8 years ago, we did not win to just fix those problems. We had a vision for finally tackling the chronic problems in New Jersey. In the 10 years before we came to Trenton, property taxes increased 70%, an average of 7% a year, every year, for 10 years. Fact. That is a chronic problem which was crippling our citizens' ability to buy and keep a home. That's why when the legislature wanted to go home in July of 2010, after passing the budget, I used my constitutional authority to call them back to finally address the growth of these taxes. And together, we passed the 2% cap on property taxes with only 4 exceptions. It was tough medicine, but tough medicine was what was needed to deal with this issue. Here's the good news. We did it for our constituents, and it worked. In 2017, DCA just gave us the numbers. Property taxes in New Jersey increased by only 1.64%. So therefore, in the last 7 years, property taxes have increased an average of 1.98% per year. The 2% cap worked. Don't change it. What has that meant to property taxpayers across the state? It has saved property taxpayers $18.2 billion over the last 7 years compared to the system previously in place. $18.2 billion. Why else did it work? Because we also gave the towns and the counties the tool to control their largest single expense, police and fire salaries. Now, we have great men and women who serve as police officers and firefighters in this state. However, they are also the highest paid firefighters in America and the second highest paid police officers in America. They are objectively not underpaid. Not 7 years ago and not today. So to make the 2% cap real, we needed to cap the interest arbitration salary increases given to them every year. So we did it in a bipartisan way, twice. And it has saved over $500 million in salary increases alone over the last 7 years, which would have been paid for by higher property taxes. See, the 2% cap and the interest arbitration cap have worked. In a state that suffered with 7% property taxes every year for a decade, that is an accomplishment of consequence for every New Jersey homeowner. So here's my first warning for taxpayers in New Jersey's future. If you do not act in a bipartisan way to renew the arbitration cap, the property taxes of our citizens will skyrocket again. The cap expired 9 days ago. The progress we've made over the last 7 years is at real risk, and our governor-elect has refused to ask the legislature to act before this cap expired. Now, if our public safety officers were underpaid, I could understand this debate. But even after 7 years of a 2% arbitration cap, they remain the highest paid public safety officers in our entire country, while our taxpayers still pay the highest property taxes in America. Let me be clear. Failure to renew this cap is a failure of leadership. A failure which would cost our citizens money they need to support their families. So, 7 days, I'm just another property taxpayer. And as another property taxpayer, I am begging you, stand up to these interests, pass the arbitration cap like you've done twice before, and do not return the citizens of our state to 7% annual property tax increases, because if you do, shame on you. Now, when we came to Trenton, I believed that we had a higher education system which was underperforming its potential and sorely needed capital investments to expand seats and modernize technology. Governors for decades had tried to address this situation and failed to do so. There was not the political will to do what would maximize our educational and economic potential and that of our students. We were more afraid of offending than we were afraid of failing. We refused to accept that state of affairs. So we worked hard, we negotiated, and we signed the bipartisan New Jersey Medical and Health Sciences Education and Restructuring Act, and we fixed decades of lost opportunity. I want to thank all those who helped make this happen, but most particularly Governor Tom Kean, who helped me develop the blueprint, and Assembly Majority Leader Lou Greenwald, who led the fight for this in the legislature against all of the opposition. Lou, it wouldn't have happened without you, and I want to say publicly, thank you. And to all the skeptics, let's review the facts. I'm doing this for you as much as I'm doing it for me, Lou. Here it comes. Today, Rutgers has a medical school, schools of public health, and their own cancer institute. It has gone from 55th in NIH funding to 22nd. And we rid ourselves of the corruption and the self-dealing that was going on at UMDNJ, a task I'm happy to say that I began as U.S. Attorney, and I'm proud to say that we finished as Governor. Rowan University became a public research university, gained a school of osteopathic medicine, now operates 2 medical schools and its nationally acclaimed School of Engineering. It's poised to double its student population and has created innovative partnerships with our community colleges to allow those students to get a 4-year degree without unthinkable student debt. So let's be clear. No one has been a greater champion of increasing higher education opportunities for South Jersey than Senate President Steve Sweeney. And Rowan would not be what it is today without his persistent leadership. Then we needed to turn to the challenge of capital improvements to our colleges and universities. This had not been done by any administration for 25 years, since Governor Tom came. And our schools showed it through lesser facilities and higher tuitions. Together, we made the case to the people of New Jersey, and we passed the Building Our Future Bond Act, which invested $1.5 billion in public money and billions more in private and philanthropic money in expanding and modernizing our campuses all over New Jersey. Over 208 individual projects are finished and are happening, and our campuses are being transformed. So while other administrations had failed our higher education institutions for 25 years due to lack of courage and lack of funding, we refused to accept that failure. Let me tell you, nothing is more consequential to our state's economic future than educational opportunity for our citizens. We didn't play small ball, everybody. We acted together. And New Jersey's higher education system is far better today than it was 8 years ago as a result of our actions. Another failing gem of our state 8 years ago was the beautiful and historic resort of Atlantic City. From the Miss America pageant to the diving horse at the Steel Pier, from America's Playland to the establishment of casino gaming, Atlantic City has been a national and international destination for more than a century. But as often happens, corruption in Atlantic City, combined with actions in Trenton, helped to bring this town to the brink of bankruptcy. Bad decisions and timid inaction based on political correctness, led to Trenton nearly killing the goose that laid the golden egg for all of New Jersey. This is another problem that I began to work on as U.S. Attorney by putting corrupt Atlantic City politicians in jail for stealing from their people. But unfortunately, that was not nearly enough to heal Atlantic City. As we entered office, let us remember, casinos were closing, property tax rebates were piling up in the hundreds of millions of dollars, the streets were unsafe, and the private sector was fleeing. Not only that, but as a result, property taxes were soaring for the residents of Atlantic City. So I turned to John Hanson, chairman of the New Jersey Sports, Gaming, and Entertainment Commission, to develop a blueprint for change. We created a tourism district. We took over policing there. We invested in national advertising and supported efforts by the city government which were well-intentioned but ultimately failed. We needed to do more, but we're being stopped by politicians inside and outside of this chamber who were just trying to score cheap political points while they were burying their heads in the sand. Finally, we fought back those entrenched and misguided interests and acted in a bipartisan way to replace the ineffective city government who was either unwilling or unable to bring about needed change. Through legislative and executive action, we took over Atlantic City. And let's look at what's happened. First, we appointed former United States Senator Jeff Chiesa to lead the effort, and he has done so with incredible skill and produced phenomenal results. Think about this. Tax appeals were weighing down the city. $303 million was owed just to the casinos in tax rebates. Senator Chiesa, using the authority we gave to him, negotiated that number down by more than 50% to just over $138 million. In 2017, we announced, and I'm glad you're all seated for this one, an 11.4% decrease in property taxes in Atlantic City, which meant an average property tax reduction for every homeowner of $621. This was the result of our budget cutting measures that reduced city spending by $56 million over the 2015 budget. And the good news is, with Jeff in charge, this budget will stay level in 2018 as well. He also reached a settlement with the police unions, And what's that led to? Now there are going to be 12-hour shifts in Atlantic City, reduced salaries, reduced terminal leave payments, and a reduced workforce of 252 officers. All agreements that would not have occurred without Senator Chiesa's intervention. As a result, Hard Rock is now investing hundreds of millions of dollars in redeveloping the Taj Mahal. The former Sands is being redeveloped. Revel has now been sold and will reopen under new management by the summer. Casino revenues are up. Non-casino revenues are up. Internet gaming has been established in this administration and is now thriving. The private sector is coming back to Atlantic City. And by the way, all without bankruptcy or selling public assets like the Water Authority. All things the naysayers said we would do when they were trying to scare you into not giving us the authority. Well, they were wrong then. And the opportunist politicians of both parties, who now say that reversing course is necessary, are just as wrong today as they were 2 years ago. Remember, the Associated Press said it, not me. The Associated Press on New Year's Day. The headline was, Atlantic City on the verge of a major revival in 2018. This will be especially true if our 6-year fight to bring sports gambling to New Jersey is successful in 2018. Now, while many experts told me to abandon this fight, we stuck with it for 6 years. And today, we await a decision by the U.S. Supreme Court, which, if we're victorious, will bolster Atlantic City even more. All of this is due to our efforts, not bowing to political correctness, not worrying about being loved today. Because if we bow to those concerns, we could easily turn this major revival into a major downturn. So today, I want to thank Mr. Hansen for 8 years of extraordinary volunteer effort on behalf of the people of New Jersey. He has done an extraordinary job. I couldn't have done it without you, John. God bless you and thank you. Atlantic City is ready for rebirth and to return to its former glory. Let's not screw it up. That's not small ball either. That's an achievement of real consequence for our entire state. Another problem we confronted 8 years ago was one that has been baffling to administrations since the 1970s. What do we do with the city of Camden? Now, some had tried to turn it into a militarized zone to stem the tide of murders and shootings. Some tried to throw money at the problem in Camden due to the urging of some corrupt politicians who later landed in jail due to the efforts of my U.S. Attorney's Office. That, of course, didn't work by itself. So we decided to confront these problems using common sense, bipartisanship, and once again, telling the hard truths that past administrations were too politically correct to say out loud. First, we established an unprecedented partnership with the Democratic mayor of Camden, Dana Red. We promised each other that we would check our politics at the door and put the interests of a resurgent Camden at the forefront. Now, Dana Red kept her word to me for 8 years, and she's here today, and for that, Dana, I say thank you, partner. Thank you very much. Second, we then needed together to establish a plan to create the foundation of any successful city in America today. Real public safety, good public education, and economic opportunity. First, we attacked the issue of public safety in 2012. It had been the deadliest year in Camden history, earning it the distinction of the nation's most violent city. So what do? We fired the failed Camden City Police Department because they were overpaid and underperformers. Everyone knew it. No one else wanted to say it. Dana and Red and I said it. We fired them. And then we partnered with the city and the Camden County freeholders to create a countywide police force with a metro division that would patrol Camden City. Get ready. For the same amount of money, we went from 160 police officers to 349 police officers. And when the next class of cadets graduates, it will bring that number to 400 police officers. What have the results been? In 2017, murders are down 66% from 2012. Robberies are down 46% from 2012, and non-fatal shootings are down 45% from 2012. And just so you have historic context, 2017 was the lowest number of murders in Camden in more than 30 years. Even more than the change in numbers, there has been a fundamental change in the relationship between the police and the public. While we all, in horror, watched violence erupt in Ferguson, Missouri, there was no such violence in Camden. Instead, under the leadership of Chief Scott Thompson, who is here today, you see police officers in Camden at churches and street fairs, at baseball games, and at school crossings. But here's the difference. At each one of those places, they are standing with the people that they are sworn to protect and serve. For Chief Thompson and the men and women of the Camden County Police Force Metro Division, God bless you for the lives you saved over the last 5 years. Next, we needed to change the failing Camden public schools. They were the worst performing public schools in New Jersey. They had 4 of the 5 lowest performing schools in New Jersey. And unlike the takeover of the Newark schools decades earlier, we worked with the school district and effectuated an agreed upon partnership. Working with the community, we picked a dynamic new superintendent, Payman Rahanafard. We began a school-by-school evaluation with the goal of improving education in every classroom. We closed schools that didn't work. We opened 3 new charter schools, 3 new Renaissance schools, and significantly cut back a wasteful central office staff. Since these changes have been made, the results have been astonishing. 5 years. In 5 years, the graduation rates have gone from 49% to 70%. The dropout rates district-wide have dropped from 21% to 12%. And this is the one that warms my heart the most. The dropout rate for African American students in Camden has been cut in half. And to those who believe that just throwing money at public education is what will fix it, Camden is the proof. We do not need to change the funding. We need to change the approach to educating these students. People who run this state need to get that through their head, and Camden is the proof of it. Of course, there's still more to do, but a good public education is now very possible for most Camden students, something we clearly couldn't have said 5 years ago. Lastly, we needed to increase economic opportunity for all those who live in Camden. Now, due to our designation of Camden as a Garden State growth zone, a promise made and kept from the 2009 campaign, 28 projects have sprung up across the city of Camden. These projects will have $1.4 billion in private investment. Private investment. It's going to create nearly 2,000 new jobs in Camden and retain over 3,500 more jobs. The development that's happening is going to spur 7,000 construction jobs for our building trades alone. And it's a who's who of American business. Holtec, Cooper MD Anderson Cancer Center, Philadelphia 76ers, Subaru of America, American Water, EMR Eastern, Lockheed Martin, Cooper University Health, and the new $700 million Camden Waterfront project, which will have office space, residential units, and a hotel. A waterfront hotel rather than a waterfront jail in Camden. We are making progress. Words I never thought I'd say from behind this podium. Business is booming in Camden. Business is booming in Camden. And by the way, so is Rutgers University, who's adding a number of buildings to its Camden campus and expanding opportunity for students there each and every day. The rebirth of Camden is happening, Dana. It's happening. What we envisioned 8 years ago is happening. And not with government giveaways or tanks in the street, but with a bipartisan spirit and a can-do attitude. Now, a lot of people have been responsible for this rebirth, but one person has never wavered in his belief in this city. I want to tell you, none of this could have been accomplished without the relentless will of George Norcross. It is indisputable that Camden has no greater cheerleader and no greater investor. I can't believe it, but I am honored that George Norcross is here today And I'm even more honored to call him my partner in this rebirth of Camden. We did it, George, and thank you for being my partner. For those of you who have known me for a long time, some of you sitting on the floor here, some of you in the gallery, when the truth be told, you know that my happiest days in public life were when I had the honor of leading federal law enforcement in New Jersey as the U.S. Attorney. They were my happiest times because I just had one simple task: ensuring that justice was done for the people of New Jersey. So when I became governor, it became so clear to me that our state criminal justice system needed major reform. The system was less effective than it should have been in preventing violent crime, and much too harsh on those whose nonviolent acts were being unduly punished. Reform would not be easy due to the power of the bail industry, decades-old prejudices, and the rhetoric of opportunist politicians always looking to seem tough on crime. See, after 7 years as U.S. Attorney, I didn't need to seem tough on crime. I am tough on crime. But being tough on crime doesn't mean that you lack compassion. Being tough on crime doesn't mean you don't believe in second chances. Once again, bipartisan cooperation was the path to success. Let me tell you a story. 16 years ago, I met the smart, articulate wife of United States Marshal Glenn Cunningham. Now, for those of you who knew them in those days, she was his partner in every way. They truly made a dynamic duo. He became a mentor of mine and later the mayor of Jersey City and a state senator. Glenn Cunningham was a great public servant, but I am sure he is bursting with pride from heaven as he watches his wife, my friend, Senator Sandy Cunningham. Together, we have crafted criminal justice reform which got the only A rating in the nation, and that is becoming a role model for other states and has gotten broad approval from all of you. See, release from jail pending trial is now no longer based on how much money you have, but on the seriousness of the accusations against you and your own criminal record. No longer can a repeat violent offender be released and terrify his victims or his old neighborhood because he has millions of dollars in cash to post bail. By the same token, no longer must you stay in jail for minor offenses longer than you would have if you'd actually be convicted of the crime which you're accused of committing, just because your family doesn't have $500 to post bail. And no longer can an employer make a job applicant with a criminal record check a box and end their chances of redemptive employment. Because together, we ban the box in New Jersey. Crimes of our youth can now be expunged in 3 years, adult crimes in 6 years, and many more crimes are eligible for life-changing expungement. County prison population is already down 17%, and 2 state prisons have been closed, saving countless millions for taxpayers. Now, with all this, violent crime in New Jersey is down 5.1% since we instituted the beginning of our reforms, and over 25%. Violent crime is down 25% during the 8 years of this administration. You see, being smart on crime has increased hope and second chances and decreased crime at the same time. So I want to thank Attorney General Chris Perino for his outstanding work on this issue. Thank you, Chris. Most of all, I want to thank my friend of 16 years, Sandy Cunningham. I'm going to embarrass you more, Sandy. Her heart and her willingness to work with me has changed hundreds of lives already and tens of thousands to come. And I'll say this to you, Sandy, I think pretty confidently. I think Glenn is proud of both of us today. Now, speaking of second chances, I devoted all of last year's State of the State address to the disease that is killing more New Jerseyans than anything else every year, the disease of opioid addiction. Now, I'm not going to go over everything I shared with you last year, but first I want to say thank you. I challenged you last year to pass groundbreaking legislation immediately, and you did. But we're still losing too many of our citizens to this disease. But now, at least, we're taking concrete steps to try to turn back the tide of death and suffering. New Jersey now has the nation's strongest limit on opioid prescriptions. And since we implemented our new restrictions in March, just in March, those prescriptions have decreased by over 15% in New Jersey. It's working. We established state sharing in our prescription monitoring program in 2014. We were the first state to do it. We shared with our neighbors in Delaware. No one else was sharing this information at that time. Since then, due to the push from New Jersey, we have 15 more additional partners sharing information with us, including now all of our neighboring states, New York, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, and Delaware. So, is the prescription monitoring program and its sharing working? Well, listen to the numbers. Back in 2015, we only had 198,000 cross-border requests into the system. In 2016, we had 1.1 million requests. And how about 2017? 3.5 million requests. With this tool, we can stop doctor shopping and pill mills across state borders, and we will save lives. In 2011, we instituted Project Medicine Drop to rid our medicine cabinets of these deadly pills. Since 2011, New Jersey was the first state to do this. Since 2011, we have collected 88 tons of pills at over 400 locations across our state, including now our corporate partner Walgreens in every store in New Jersey. We're getting these pills out of the hands of our children and disposing of them in an environmentally safe way. Attorney General Perino has instituted an online way for pharmacists and doctors and nurses and other citizens to report suspicious use or sale of opioids. And in addition, he has ended the toxic financial relationship between pharmaceutical companies and physicians, which can influence prescribing habits by placing strict regulatory limits on what pharmaceutical companies can pay doctors. It will stop this cycle, I guarantee you. That's not all. We've expanded the availability of Narcan statewide. We expanded Medicaid. We obtained a waiver from the federal government to open more treatment beds. We have connected patients with recovery coaches in every county in this state following their drug overdoses. We've converted a state prison to an inpatient drug treatment facility, and we've made drug court available in every corner of this state, all in the last 8 years. Through our Reach NJ program, we are lowering the stigma of addiction and connecting desperate families with the hope that comes from addiction treatment. Due to all of our work, I had the honor of chairing the President's Commission on combating drug addiction and the opioid crisis. My lead member of this bipartisan group is here today, and I now call him New Jersey's Patrick Kennedy because he was smart enough to marry a Jersey girl. Welcome home, Patrick Kennedy. Patrick and I, together with Professor Madras and Governor Cooper and Governor Baker and Attorney General Bondi, we presented 65 comprehensive recommendations to the President, and just last week, the White House announced that they have accepted each and every one of our 65 recommendations and are now moving towards implementation. And when they are implemented, we will have a real chance to stop the dying. Patrick, it could not have been done without our partnership, and our friendship going forward, I am convinced, will be based on making sure that people who are addicted and have mental health problems get the help they need and get it now. Because I don't want you to ever forget, ever forget. 175 people a day are dying in America every day. A 9/11 every 2.5 weeks. I am proud that we have planted New Jersey's flag on the side of hope and treatment and recovery. Believe me, I can tell you, we are truly leading the nation on this issue. I also want to thank an inspiration for all these efforts, and the star of our Reach NJ television ads, Ms. Vanessa Vitolo. She has been in recovery for over 3 years now from her heroin addiction, and she has become the beacon of hope for so many New Jersey families suffering with addiction. It is completely appropriate, as I look up in the gallery, that Vanessa is sitting with my cabinet, because she has practically been a member of the cabinet for the last year. I can't thank you enough, Vanessa, for your honesty, for your courage. It is an inspiration to millions of New Jerseyans who are suffering from the same disease that you are combating every day. We love you, and we're counting on you. Thank you, Vanessa. New Jersey's infrastructure and the Transportation Trust Fund, which supports it, has been on autopilot since 1988. That was the last time any major changes to the program were made, the last time the funding sources were directly addressed. When I became governor, I made a commitment to the building trades and the business community that during my 8 years as governor, I would be the first governor in 25 years to responsibly expand infrastructure spending. See, I had some demands of my own. I wanted more than the usual 5-year plan for infrastructure investment. I wanted the TTF to stop being a political football for both parties. I wanted a plan that significantly increased our expenditures on infrastructure. I wanted a plan that constitutionally dedicated every penny of the gas tax. And I wanted a plan that also represented tax fairness to the people of New Jersey. Glad to tell all of you that together we reached every one of those goals. And our next governor, no matter how long he serves, will not have to reauthorize the TTF during his tenure. We crafted a plan where both commuters and taxpayers win. So what do we have? We have an 8-year plan, the longest in the history of the TTF. We have an 8-year plan which will spend $16 billion in state funds. That increases infrastructure spending in this state by 25%. We increased the gas tax, and the voters constitutionally dedicated every penny of it for only infrastructure spending. And we devised a plan that actually lowers taxes on the citizens of New Jersey. Can't believe I'm going to look right at my Democratic friends for this one, because I want to remind you what you did with me. Look up, Lou. I'm talking to you. Look at my Democratic friends. Together, we lowered the sales tax. Together, we exempted $100,000 in retirement income from state income tax for our seniors. Together, we honored our veterans by giving them a significant tax exemption. And together, finally and most importantly, we went from the most punitive death tax in America to no death tax at all. No longer will our seniors have to move to another state to avoid this onerous tax. We did it all together. I remember sitting in my office in Newark and going over the final math with Speaker Prieto on a piece of paper. No matter how you think things get done because people get in the same room together, get out a piece of paper and say, here's what I'm willing to do and here's what I'm not willing to do. And together, the Speaker, the Senate President, and I negotiated these measures, and when they're taken together with the gas tax increase, they lead to a net $200 million tax cut for the people of New Jersey. So think about what we did together. more infrastructure spending every year for 8 years, more guaranteed years of investment, a dedicated, reliable funding source, and I know you guys love this phrase, tax fairness for the people of New Jersey. This is another example of bipartisan cooperation that comes from us not only hearing each other, but truly listening to and respecting each other. And the winners are the drivers, commuters, and taxpayers of our state. We've secured 8 years of reliable funding for our roads, bridges, and mass transit system, and eliminated the death tax in New Jersey. Now those are certainly consequential accomplishments. October 29th, 2012. For New Jerseyans, that is a date none of us will ever forget. Superstorm Sandy changed New Jersey forever, and it changed me too. You see, no person can see the destruction to lives and property that I personally witnessed every day for months across my home state and not be dramatically changed. The pain, the suffering, and the raw emotion of our citizens made me promise that I would do all that I could to recover from that day and rebuild our state as strongly and as quickly as possible. Whenever I'm asked what I'm most proud of in these last 8 years, I say it very simply. It's the days and weeks, months, and years since Sandy and the way our government handled it. The results were not always perfect. You know, they never are perfect. But I'll tell you what was perfect. The effort, the compassion, and the focus of all the people in our administration every day for over 5 years. 365,000 homes significantly damaged or destroyed. Roadways in every corner of the state destroyed or impassable. 2/3 of the state without power for more than 2 weeks. Only a handful of gas stations opened. No water treatment or wastewater treatment plants operational across the state. Shelters that needed to be staffed and supplied to keep people alive. Thousands of tons of debris strewn throughout the state. People wet and tired and cold and scared. Leadership was needed. And leadership was provided from every sector of our state and our nation. Nonprofits, faith-based organizations, governmental entities, all answered our call for help. We were grateful then, and we are still grateful today. As a state government, we devised and operated individual programs, 97 new programs focused on housing, on schools, on insurance claims, on small business, on mental health, on social services, on family support, on local and county government services, on energy restoration, on food supply, on fuel supply, and dozens of others. We stood them up where they never existed before October 29, 2012. This has never been done before on this scale in our state. There's no blueprint that they leave you in the top desk drawer when you get this job to deal with this. We started from scratch by responding to the needs of our people. We facilitated the removal with our towns and counties of over 8 million cubic yards of storm debris. Now, we had lots of fun with that back then. Hearings, all kinds of crazy stuff. Now that we have some perspective and the politics of the moment is cooled, let me give you the facts on storm debris removal real quickly. It was completed within 100 days of the storm by the private contractors we hired at $50 per cubic yard. Let us compare that not to Louisiana, not to Mississippi, not to Florida. Let's compare that to New York and the same storm, who hired the Army Corps of Engineers to do the job. They paid $100 a cubic yard, double the cost for 1/8 of the debris, and it took twice as long to remove it. So let's make the record clear. We save time and money for the people of New Jersey. That's the only way the recovery can start, is when the debris is removed. And we did it efficiently, effectively, and with a cost savings. Now, 5 years later, 85% of all families who applied for housing help are back in their pre-Sandy homes. We have distributed $2 billion in housing assistance to those in need, $2 billion. For those who were living in flood-prone areas at the time and did not want to go home, at the direction of the DEP, Bob Martin, and his Blue Acres program, we have spent over $100 million to buy those homes at pre-storm values to give those families a fresh start and to walk away from the nightmare of perpetual flooding and the damage and destruction to their lives and their property. We've built over 3,100 new affordable housing units, with another 2,600 under construction as we speak. $350 million was successfully distributed to families in aid to help them pay their mortgages, their rent payments, and the repair costs. We stood up for our devastated towns, especially at the shore, by creating a new program that provided $133 million in grants to towns to fund essential services like police and public works and education without property tax increases. And, by the way, we came back on the debris removal, and the 10% match that they had to pay to the federal government, we paid it, so that property taxes would not be affected. We secured $111 million in loans to bridge any gap a town had in providing their longer-term services. We helped citizens under stress by providing 60,000 of our citizens with behavioral health screenings. Over 3,500 people received drug addiction treatment for addiction that began because of Sandy. More than 10,000 families received psychological services through the schools or the community service centers arranged for by our administration. And to rebuild our small business community, which was devastated by Sandy, we developed new programs called Stronger NJ Business Loans and Stronger NJ Grants. We distributed $56 million in grants and $86 million in zero-interest loans to more than 1,200 businesses. Through these programs, we rebuilt our business community, and Moody's now concluded that 5 years later, the business community is stronger and more resilient than it was pre-Sandy. That helped us have our best tourism year ever, with over $44 billion in tourism spending in New Jersey. And we've invested to make sure the next storm that comes will not devastate us again, like Sandy did. For my friends in Ocean County, we rebuilt the destroyed Route 35 to a state-of-the-art standard of storm resilience. We established an energy resilience bank for over $200 million in rotating loans to do energy resilience projects. We were awarded $1.25 billion for New Jersey transit resilience projects. And I want to remind you, that was the highest award given to any of the 13 states that competed for those grants. 127 gas stations have now become completely energy resilient, so they can operate on generators in the event of another long-term power outage. Over $500 million has been invested in our wastewater treatment plant, so never again will a governor have to make the decision to dump raw sewage into our state's waterways because none of the wastewater treatment plants are working. We've engaged in a $1 billion coastal restoration project to build dunes and other protections to ensure that another Sandy-type event does not devastate our Jersey shore. From Cape May to Union Beach, we are building protections that our citizens will be able to count on for decades to come. Leaving our shore unprotected again was not acceptable after Sandy. We've built seawalls in Seabright. We've put sheet piling in Maniloking, mitigation on the Hackensack River, pump stations in Brigantine, tide gates in Little Ferry, and piping systems in Belmar's Lake Como. We are more prepared today than at any time in our history, and it happened because we not only wanted to recover, but we wanted to rebuild stronger. We can't stop our efforts until every family gets back in its home. The job is almost done, but almost isn't good enough. But we have recovered in half the time it took Mississippi and Louisiana to recover to similar statistics from Katrina, and we are still way ahead of New York's recovery from the same storm. So to all those who worked in this recovery, most particularly Mark Furzan and the men and women of the Governor's Office of Recovery and Rebuilding, you have my undying gratitude, as do the people of the state of New Jersey. Thank you, Mark. Superstorm Sandy was a defining moment of our last 8 years. It was our greatest challenge, and it provided us with our most satisfying personal and professional moments. All New Jersey proved we were, in fact, stronger than the storm. You can sing the song to yourselves. A smart, politically balanced, and fully staffed judiciary should be the goal of every governor. It certainly was mine. And we worked hard to make sure the law was followed and that justice was available to all of our citizens. You may not know this, but state law requires that there be an equal distribution between Republicans and Democrats on our Superior Court. That law was blatantly being ignored for years when we arrived in Trenton. When I arrived here, there were 31 more Democrats than Republicans on the state court bench. So we fought not only to appoint better judges, but to ensure the political balance that our law requires. While this did lead to a few moments of strife, in the end, we nearly delivered on all those goals. The Chief Justice knows this. And I want to say that our 16-year association has been one of the true joys of my public life. And we work together on this problem as well. And so, once again, Mr. Chief Justice, you owe me big time. Let me tell you why. There are more judges on the bench today than at any time in New Jersey history. In fact, there are only 11 judicial vacancies out of 462 judicial seats. I know this is right because Grant is nodding his head yes. So I know it's right. The guy with the stats is right over here. Justice is now available to everyone in every county. And just as importantly, we have moved from an imbalance of 31 seats to only a 5-seat difference between Republicans and Democrats. Now, I hope as we move forward, the governor-elect and the senators in this chamber respect the rule of law and finish the job we started by keeping the bench full and politically balanced. No state of the state would be complete, particularly not a state of the state of mind. No responsible discussion of New Jersey's future can happen in this room without a discussion of the sword of Damocles that hangs over the head of every New Jerseyan, our pension system, and how it dominates any hope of building on the success of the last 8 years. In 2009, I was proud to start a discussion that no governor in America was honestly having. The discussion on our broken state pension system and how its unaffordable promises were choking the ability of state government and its citizens for investing in the future. No one wanted to really talk about it. The good news for me, though, was that the only other public official in New Jersey who had honestly discussed this issue was elected Senate President the same year I was elected governor. A perfect storm, some might say. Previous governors and legislatures virtually ignored the growing menace of increased costs and no real contributions. Benefits were regularly made more generous. Assumed rates of return were irresponsibly increased to hide the problem. And I want you to hear this. For 14 straight years, not enough was contributed by the state to even cover that year's costs, let alone the exploding unfunded liability. Let me be clear about this, too. It was done by both parties. It was done when economic times were bad. It was done when economic times were booming. And so, in my last time in this chamber, I am tired of hearing the baloney that is spewed on this issue. Let's go to the facts and let's go back to the 1980s and every decade since. Governor Kane drastically increased benefits for police and fire personnel and did not pay for it. It was paid for by quietly increasing the assumed rate of return in 1988. Governor Florio increased the assumed rate of return again only 3 years later from 7% to 8.75% to avoid making any pension payments. Governor Whitman floated backloaded pension bonds which will cost us 4 times what we borrowed when we finally finish paying them off in the next decade. Governor DeFrancesco drastically increased benefits for all pensioners, and no additional funding was put forward. Governors McGreevey and Governor Cody made virtually no contributions to the pension funds in their shared 4 years. And Governor Corzine stubbornly maintained the assumed rate of return at over 8.25% to continue to hide this growing problem from the public and avoid even larger expected pension payments. Both parties, for 30 years, added to this problem. They didn't talk about it. They not only didn't fix it, they made it worse each and every year. And then they deposited it in my lap in January of 2010 and said it's your fault. We didn't hide the problem from the people. We didn't hide from confronting it ourselves. I got on the road, I traveled the state, I held town hall meetings, and I sounded the alarm. And what do we get in return? We were regularly attacked for it by union leaders who have never cared how we would pay for all these reckless promises. They've only cared that the checks keep coming. No matter the road to ruin it put the other 8.1 million New Jerseyans on for the future. So what did we do? In 2011, we passed historic reform that made employees pay a more realistic share of their pension costs, pay some share of their health insurance costs, and end cost of living adjustments until the funds were once again solvent. These reforms will save $120 billion for the system over 30 years and have staved off, for the time being, the insolvency of the system. While the state had to adjust our payment plan from 1/7 to 1/10 per year, the reforms made sense then and they make even more sense now. But we didn't stop there. To further secure the system, we dedicated the lottery to the pension system for the next 30 years. This dedication, along with the state's payments, will get the funds to 90% funded within 30 years. And it's another step this administration took to secure the pension system. We also have made unprecedented cash contributions to the pension system. In our 8 years, we have contributed $8.8 billion in cash to the system. This represents 2.5 times more than the last 5 governors before me combined. If such contributions had been being made all along, our problems would almost be non-existent. We also took a diversified, professional, and bipartisan approach to investing these funds for the last 8 years under Republican Bob Grady and Democrat Tom Byrne, who is with us here today. Our returns have beaten those of most public plans, even while taking less risk than 90% of them. That is the fact. Here's another one. The market value of the fund since February of 2010 has increased by $10 billion, even though in the last 8 years we've paid out $70 billion in benefits. But despite all of this, 2 things remain true. We still have a big problem to tackle, and that problem will only be solved by making these benefits more realistic for both pensions and health insurance. A bipartisan commission has laid out a plan that can and will work if you all finally have the will to implement it. If we do not, let me assure you that there are not enough taxes to raise or programs to cut to feed the insatiable beast of public employee pensions and Platinum Plus health benefits. And let me assure you of one other thing. No matter what you do, unless it involves complete capitulation, you will be vilified by the public union leaders. Now, we've seen that play out with me for 8 years, and for my Democratic friends, if you think you're immune, I'm sure your attention was drawn to a small legislative race this year. Let me tell you about these folks. Their actions speak louder than their words or their money ever can. If you don't believe me, let's review the record one more time. The facts. More money contributed than the last 5 governors combined. The lottery completely dedicated to the pensions. Quarterly payments rather than annual payments. All these things were signed by this governor, yet I think few have been more publicly criticized by these union leaders than I have been. See, the solving of this problem will not lead you to be loved. The gratitude you ultimately receive will be from future residents who won't be living in a bankrupt state where 8.1 million people are working every year until June or July to pay the retirement and health benefits for 800,000 retirees. That is unacceptable. That is unsustainable. The choice before you is clear, but it's tough. Let me advise you, the failure to act option is running out of time. I have put every ounce of political capital I ever had on the line to bring about the changes we have made, and I don't regret 1 minute of it, despite the impact it's had on my political standing. I've tried to live by the words of Winston Churchill when he said, "Success is not final, and failure is not fatal. The courage to continue is what counts." Continue I have done for 8 years on this issue, and I pray for our state today that you will do the very same thing in the months and years ahead. Today, and I know Loretta keeps count of this, today is my 2,913th day as governor of New Jersey. Big calendar in her office. I have loved the job, and I am so grateful to all the people of New Jersey for giving me the chance to serve the state where I was born and raised and where my 4 children were born and raised. I wish Governor-elect Murphy and his family every success and every joy that is possible for them over the next 4 years. Next Tuesday at noon, he'll be my governor too. His success will be our success, and I hope for him and our state nothing but blue skies ahead for the next 4 years. Now, when you have this job, though, it can be lonely. But if you're lucky, you're never really alone. Those around you make the days filled with friendship and camaraderie. I feel fortunate to have been joined in this venture by New Jersey's first Lieutenant Governor, Kim Guadagno. Think about what she's done. She executed her uncharted duties, and she did it with class and with energy and with good humor. Kim, can't thank you enough for taking this ride with me, for your service to me and for your service to the people of the state. I will always, always be personally grateful. I've been fortunate to have at the helm of one of the other co-equal branches of government a person who approached his job in the same way I approached mine, with passion, with vigor, with emotion, with resolve, with stubbornness, and with at times some pretty colorful language. The achievements I spoke of today would not have been possible without a person of goodwill and honesty and character to fight with, and to make deals with, and to have fun with these last 8 years. Senate President Steve Sweeney is a great leader, but he's an even a better man. I've enjoyed our 8-year journey, and I will miss our early morning phone calls. But most of all, I mean this from the heart, Steve, I am happy and relieved that as I depart, that you will remain right in that chair to help ensure the safety and success of New Jersey's future. Thank you, my friend. And by the way, Craig, the first 4 hours have been great. There are not words sufficient. There are not words sufficient to thank your family for what they endure and support and tolerate when someone they love serves as governor. It has been a true joy to have my dad, at 84 years old, to be here to witness every day of these last 8 years and to represent himself and my mom. Thanks for being a wonderful father. To my brother Todd and my sister Dawn and their spouses Andrea and Russ, thanks for always understanding the missed events and the missed phone calls and for never ever holding it against me. You made this a lot easier, and thank you both very, very much. To my 4 children who have grown up in front of the people of New Jersey because of the job their dad picked. The true joys of the last 8 years were almost always produced by Andrew, Sarah, Patrick, and Bridget. I love you all. To my wife of 31 years, can you imagine putting up with me for 31 years? Loretta's shaking her head, Mary Pat. There's the shocker of the day. The mother of our children and our incredibly classy and energetic First Lady, Mary Pat. Mary Pat, you and only you know the true depth of the joys and challenges of the last 8 years, because only you have been there every step of the way. Thanks for each of those steps, and thanks even more for your love and for your understanding. It wasn't possible without you. Now, in the end, a governor cannot be elected, cannot be worth electing, and can't be worth keeping for 8 years without a great team. 16 years ago, I was sworn in as U.S. Attorney, and every day since, I have been blessed to be surrounded and served by an extraordinary, extraordinary team. I can't name all of you, but I don't have to, because your service to me was just that, selfless. But they are represented by names like Rich Bagger and Jeff Chiesa, Maria Camella and Bill Palatucci, Charlie McKenna and Kevin O'Dowd, Amy Craddock and Tom Scrivo, Chris Perino and Michelle Brown, Paul Mady and Mike Duhame. To my team, we worked very hard, we worked very well, and always for the right reason, to do the right thing. And now, as the final hours of our partnership slip away, I am regularly reminded of the great Tennyson quote from Ulysses. And I truly believe that it applies to each and every one of you and the road we have traveled together for these last 16 years. So please listen carefully. Though much is taken, much abides. And though we are not now that strength which in old days moved heaven and earth, that which we are, we are. One equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and never, never to yield. For me and the team I brought with me to this place 8 years ago, that sums up what we came here to do. To strive, to win for the people we serve. to seek that which is good and right in all that we do, to find solutions to problems that no one could solve before us, and never, never to yield, not to pressure or polls, not to lies or puffery, not to partisanship or that old phrase that's never been done here before. I leave you today grateful, happy, and a better man than I was when I walked in here for the first time 8 years ago. For that and so much more, I thank you. But most of all, I thank the wonderful people of the great state of New Jersey. I came to this job 8 years ago proud to be one of you. I leave it next week even prouder to be one of you. God bless you and farewell.